Hello, Reality Sandwich Conscious Community. Kyle here back with another unique Share Your Experience interview. I'm joined by the very psychedelic, very talented musician, Willy Christie, aka Kakuni. Willy, welcome to the Share Your Experience series.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I could read your whole PR piece right here and background about you, but would love to hear it from your own voice. You're a musician in Los Angeles. Would love to hear a little bit about yourself, what kind of music you make and what keeps you inspired these days.
Cool. Yeah, I moved here from Kansas. Uh, Music scene's just a little bit better. I don't know if you've heard. Uh, and yeah, I enjoy making music, and I work at a weed shop, so it's kind of it's hard to do that in Kansas. So I moved out here, and it's been about 8 years of just living, just doing the thing, and uh, I don't know. It's been a really fun journey, and psychedelic music is I can't not make it. It's like I'll try to do something poppy, and I'm just like, what if it had a little bit of delay, And next thing I know, it's another psychedelic thing, and I don't know. Maybe it's just those experiences were so powerful, or maybe there's something even deeper. It is just like a universal kind of aesthetic appeal of this like psychedelic dream realm.
I really love that living the California dream, right into the artist combining plant medicine, music. What musicians and artists inspired you growing up in Kansas, and what really gave you that spark to want to craft your own musical numbers?
That's a great question. For me, a big part of I grew up with music, but I never really fell in love with it until honestly, probably uncle, my uncle Phil showed me like Boston when I was very young. He was like turning me onto rock essentially. My mom listened to country, female singing, female lead country, and my dad wasn't so big into music, but he liked Stevie Wonder and stuff like that. So there was some cool stuff, but it was really like rock and roll, like specifically the Red Hot Chili Peppers. When I discovered them in like sixth grade, I couldn't get enough. I just listened to that just nonstop. It was Chili Peppers and Queen, probably. Just something about those guitar solos, man.
When did you start producing your own music? Did you immediately gravitate to the guitar or the piano? What was that first instrument you picked up, and how did that evolve in your formative years?
hmm Started with the guitar. I grew up with the piano. My mom taught piano, but she knew better than to try to force us, me and my brother, to do anything. So uh, when I took sax lessons in grade school, but then really I asked for a guitar for Christmas when I was like 13 or 14, and even then didn't really know to start making music until I was just so obsessed with listening to it. And then I had a buddy that just kind of, he was like, let's jam, like my buddy Charlie taught me how to jam. And that was really the probably step one was church songs, cover songs into like, wait a second, like you can just make stuff up on the spot. And then after jamming with him and more friends over the next couple years, I was like, wait, like some of our jams are better than some of the songs that I listen to. Debatable, but I also was not listening to very good music either. So maybe I wasn't wrong. And that was sort of there was just that moment where it was just like I think I can write songs too. And then turns out it costs a lot of money to have somebody produce and mix and all that, and I did not have the money, so I figured it's probably about 19 or 20 with my first band where it really was like, somebody has to produce this. And it was just like, well, we might as well just, instead of spending $1,500 to get one song produced, we spent $1,500 on like some microphones and recording equipment. And it was bad, it was not professional, but, you know, 10, 15 years later, I feel, I'm so glad that I started doing it then.
Excellent. Yeah, really got to pick up those skills, and as you learn, doing it, if you want it done right, doing it yourself is most likely the best option.
Hmm.
Growing up in Kansas, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure the stigma around plant medicine, cannabis, psychedelics was pretty heavy. I'm sure, you were reinforced with the war on drugs language. What was your first, did you try cannabis from a young age? What was that first plant medicine experience then? How did that impact your musical progression?
Yeah, yeah. I would say I was a good boy. I was like a little Catholic boy all the way, but found a group of friends when I was 16. Before I even smoked weed, they're like, "You should listen to Bob Marley and Pink Floyd." What do you mean you've never listened to Bob Marley and Pink Floyd? And believe it or not, that was the same group that introduced me to weed. And yeah, it was awesome. Everything was new again, tasting, eating, hearing. Like it was all just, that was the beginning of the end for me for sure.
Actually, I'd like to talk about what now. When did you first move to Los Angeles, and again, how did your job you having cannabis and flow into your musical mission?
I Yeah, I moved out in 2016. I saved up for about a year. I'd wanted to move out in 2010, but I wasn't ready yet. That was actually a psychedelic experience that uh, it was pushing me towards LA. And then the night before I was supposed to move the first time, I did LSD and had a really big revelation that I was not happy in Kansas. And so I certainly wasn't going to be happy in LA. And that was a really hard thing to explain to my parents that I changed my mind the night before. But I think they were happy. And next thing I knew, it was 5 years later. And I was like, wow, it was 5 years since I wanted to move to LA. I looked at my life. I was happy. I'd been doing what I wanted to do. I was growing weed very illegally. I was making music. And I was just like, I think I'm ready now. I'm happy now. And that means that I'm ready to go. And so I moved out 8 years ago and moved in with my buddy Charlie, the same guy who taught me how to jam. Very influential person in my life. He let me stay with him in his apartment in West Hollywood for supposed to be a month, ended up being like a year, and because we got along really well, obviously. And I got a job with Venice Cookie Company. I just applied to every single weed job I could and got my foot in the door as just like a delivery guy. I just delivered the edibles to the dispensaries, and worked my way up after a couple months. And it's been, and then the cannabis industry, that's a whole other conversation. Every job I've had has basically gone out of business for the past 7 years. But
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Veteran in the cannabis industry
oh
here. Yeah,
man.
it's tough, definitely tough in California for sure. We'll see how we evolve. Back to that initial spark, it sounds like your profound LSD experience is really what set you on this path. Would love to dive deeper into that. Give me the setup. How did you, who gave this to you, and walk me through that whole experience.
Hmm. I think the initial like mystery started with a mushroom trip. It was just kind of like weed and mushrooms go hand in hand. I want to say that the Tenacious D movie had a nice, it was a good advertisement for mushrooms. That I don't know if you remember the baby Sasquatch scene.
Yeah, yeah, love that movie.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this Jack Black, obviously huge weed smoker in all those Tenacious D bits. So I was like, okay, and they do mushrooms too. This seems pretty safe. It's not, did it. Did mushrooms right after I was failing college with my friend Charlie, who also had failed college at the same time. And it turned into us just crying. We were crying in front of all of our high school friends. We had a house party and we were the only two on mushrooms. And we're both just crying like, oh, what have we done? Like, we've dropped out of college, we've messed up our whole lives, man. Like, oh no. And for some reason, like, we still enjoyed it, like after embarrassing ourselves in front of everyone in our high school class, which is about as bad as you can imagine. We were just like, we should do that again. And we, eventually it got into LSD, just because, in Kansas and still America, because psychedelics are pretty illegal, you kind of just get what, oh, can't do mushrooms this weekend. I know a guy that has acid at least. And, I think it's very similar. It's definitely not the same, but like you can get to the same place through both, I think. And it was just like little experiences here and there until I finally had like the proper LSD, like peak experience. I was at my ex's mom's house, which is a crazy place to do acid. And just, the walls just, everything went away and just kind of got sucked out, watched my life before my eyes, my extremely unique, fits like a glove type of life, and uh, came back out of it just like, what the fuck? What was that? That is it okay if I cuss? I
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah, please, free
Well,
form.
I figure we're talking about psychedelics. I think that okay.
Right.
I was just truly, truly, truly shocked in a way. Like, my entire reality shifted, and I had no reference for it. There was no Tenacious D movie on like experiencing oneness with God. There was uh, the Bible was the closest thing I could think of, and that was not helping until I found a book on a Barnes and Noble bookshelf called LSD Psychotherapy, I think it was, by Dr. Stanislav Grof. Bought that just because I flipped open a couple pages and instantly he's just like, doorway to the numinous, like experiencing oneness with God. Here are patients' drawings of their experiences. And I was like, oh my God, like this is fuck, like this is exactly, I spent months searching. I was lost for a while because I was so, that's so like radical. It's
Mhm.
such a huge change, and you're just like, wait a second, what is real is a very like scary thing to be carrying with you every day. And then finally finding like the pocket of people that are like, yes, this is actually like, this is what you experience, this is normal, blah blah blah. And then I just got into all the like, you know Timothy Leary stuff, the Book of the Dead, all of the like, I was just like, okay, now I need to chart this territory. It was just like a completely new map. And uh yeah, it's been making my life whatever I want since then, trying my best.
That's beautiful. That's really, I feel like psychedelics really unpack a lot from all of us internally, and again, it's always beautiful to hear stories like that of them spearheading somebody on their mission and finding their calling, and really, getting into what they want to do.
Hmm.
How did your religious teachings and upbringing, post integration psych LSD experience, how did that play a role, and how did you reflect on the lessons you were taught, and what your parents might have thought, and all of that?
That's a good one. I was like full blown atheist from 18 to 20, probably. Just I went
Sounds about
from,
right.
yeah, yeah, you're right. I went from being like, I was an apologist for a little bit. I thought I was going to be a priest, or like right when I started questioning, the priest was just like, have you considered being a priest? He kind of just like nipped it in the bud. He's just like, oh, you're asking questions? Why don't you study harder? And I was like, maybe I will. Uh, and then it just got to the point where I'm just like arguing against evolution. And I was like, this is like, why can't there be both? And then there was like uh, the Vatican like segment in, I think it was Bill Maher's Religulous. He's interviewing Vatican members, and one of them's just like, I don't know who told people to like mix science with the church. Like, the Bible was written before like math was even invented. So it's like, how are we going to get numbers and figures and dates and, like that helped a lot, but it was really like obviously unity with God, man. Like that's a pretty easy way to kind of reinvigorate your faith. And I didn't like dive full back in Catholic. I saw it as like, oh, Jesus is one of many like enlightened teachers, like spreading truth. And I like to see that. I like to think that it kind of showed me the truth in all of the Catholic teachings, like, and also all of the like hypocrisy and humanity in the institutions. But like, really, the truth in the scripture is awesome. The metaphor is beautiful. It's timeless poetry. But like, it also opened up every almost every religious text that I read is like, oh yeah, like everybody's talking about the same thing. We're all just the blind dudes touching the elephant, like. And I think LSD just lets you see that elephant, and where you can be like, oh yeah, like he's on the trunk, like that dude's definitely touching the leg, like that's how I saw it.
Beautifully put. Now, with your, it sounds like you were pretty heavily involved in rock music and producing that, and then how, again, post psychedelic experience, how did that impact your creativity and the music you wanted to write and produce, and what was that first track you put together?
Yeah, it was definitely some psychedelic concept album. You can definitely be sure of that. It was the combination of like fun jams with friends, and then like deep searching, spiritual, like lofty preaching, obviously being my first go. It's like, oh, I have to share this newfound wisdom with the world. And it was just, and I'm still grappling with that, trying to find the like relatable personal stuff, but also like make it deep, make it have like substance. But yeah, it was definitely like first big song was a song called Soul Research. Like that was one of my first like true songs that I wrote by myself for myself. And yeah, it was just about, I don't even remember if it was still kind of vague, but it was just like uh, quenching your soul's thirst. Essentially, that was kind of through the metaphor of rain. Pretty simple, but that's exactly what I was going through. 20 years of living on this planet to finally feel like I understood something about like my role in the universe, if you will.
Beautifully put. What excites you most about the LA music scene? And again, you've got some really awesome vibes you do with your music. Very, I can hear the plant medicine influence. And again, we were putting it on here with my colleagues and vibing out. What surprised you most about the scene, and what has your fans and community reaction been to the vibes you curate?
The reaction to the scene was honestly a little. I was shocked to find that there were very few like decent bands. Like kind of my lesson moving out here was like you're either just like in your lane doing your thing, good or bad, just nothing very successful, or you are signed and you're already doing the thing. Like there's a very little in between, because
Mhm.
LA, it's like as soon as somebody shows up, there's 100 people whose job it is to get them. So
Mhm.
the scene is not as vibrant as you'd think. In at least in terms of like, I mean, granted, part of that's probably just because like rock and roll is so dead too, and
Mhm.
live music is so weird right now. But that being said, there are so like this is where all the like talent is. I feel like so many drummers, so many producers and engineers that just live. You'll just run into them at a coffee shop. Just overhear somebody, oh, I'm mixing the newest Pink Floyd album, or it's just like it's here and it's happening. It's just like it's happening here, but it's showing everywhere else in the world. Like um, and that being said, like the best bands come through LA too. Coming from Kansas and missing every single decent band, it's really nice to just be like, oh wow, this band that I didn't even, I'm still in Kansas brain. Like I'm never going to get to see this band. They're too niche. They're too weird. They have 700 listeners on Spotify. And sure enough, they play LA every time they come through. So getting to see the big acts that are already successful, but not super big to travel the whole country, LA is almost always a stop. So I'm very grateful to just be inspired by my favorite bands, my friends' bands, and the it gets uh, combined too, where like you'll meet somebody that is a idol of yours that becomes a friend, or a friend all of a sudden blows up and becomes somebody else's idol. Like LA is a great place for it is a good place to be a musician. It's just you're with your community.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully put. I think plant medicine, psychedelics is all about community building, and we're really seeing the initiatives and people wanting to build a new system, a new way of living after, being exposed and integrating this into their new mindset and paradigm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What was your first live music festival concert experience? Did you take psychedelics before seeing somebody, and what was an experience that really stood out and impacted you?
I mean, I have to say my first concert was a Free Hansen concert when I was little, but that I don't even remember if they played. Like I think we showed up and the band was like, oh, and I think they were just on drugs or something. Like I don't know. I do not think they performed. But psychedelic experience, I took acid to go see Tool, and
Wow.
yeah. And I loved Tool at the time too. I still really like a lot of their
Yeah,
older stuff.
I just saw them last year when they
Oh
did.
my gosh.
Yeah, in Palm Desert, it was ACDC, Tool. It was really really awesome.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Uh, but
Power Trip. Power Trip was the festival.
that's a perfect, like literally perfect AB.
It
Uh,
was a power trip for sure.
literally. But I took acid to go see Tool at. It was in Kansas, so maybe that was a part of why I didn't enjoy it as much. But I think for me, like the spectacle, you know, it just gets deflated. I was, for me, psychedelics are just so internal, I suppose, that like I thought I would have fun like everybody else does. I wish I could take psychedelics and go into a public gathering, but that just it was horrible for me. I like, the show was great and it was ethereal and it was otherworldly and truly like the visuals were like the visuals were almost like taking away from my psychedelic visuals, because they're so powerful and like it's simulacra or something. And I went home and was just like, I was already fighting that breakthrough in public, because like that's not the place to do it. And so like I was just like stuck in that like I was just repressing the breakthrough the whole time because I was in public. And like I just told myself like that is, as this like spiritual plant medicine for me, I just can't do it like that anymore. Like it's got to be set and setting, in like a Tool concert in like a giant concrete venue in Kansas. Turns out is not the ideal setting.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to educate. Setting is just so important to these experiences. And again, there are different substances for different use cases. It sounds like the mushrooms and the LSD definitely more internal, as you're saying, more intentional with what you want to do. It This is not a party drug. You don't want to be taking these and trying to interact and be social and
Yeah.
curious. How intentional are you? What is your current regimen? Are you a mushroom microdoser? What is your current you know regiment with plant medicine use and your musical production?
Strictly speaking, like I jokingly say I did my time. I had the 20 to 24. I was pretty regularly, like every 2 3 weeks, as the tolerance allows, like integrating, doing mushrooms or acid, and just like with the intention of kind of diving in, clearing out the psyche, seeing what there was to explore. And I just started having like, it was the same peak experience every time. And that's when I started kind of thinking like, and you can't do these psychedelic things without seeing the parallels in meditation and understanding that like states of trance and like holotropic breath work, that they're like um, hundreds of other ways to induce these same states of consciousness without mushrooms or LSD, without even taking a drug. So for me, it was like this. Um, I think the best quote for me, it was like, there's a difference between opening a door and walking through it. And like, LSD opens that door, but it just felt like I was just standing at the threshold every 3 weeks. Like, yeah, that's the life I should be living. Oh, yeah, that's definitely the life I should be living. And so I just kind of like told myself to just step through that door, like walk. And so it's been like, it was that last trip in 2010. That was my last time I did acid. I had a really powerful MDMA experience on accident in like 2017. Note to users: do not snort pure MDMA. Um,
I'd love to hear more about that. So give me the set and setting. Are you at a concert, or are you just hanging with your friends?
yep, I was at a concert in Vancouver. So I was in another country, in another place with a dear friend of mine, an internet friend who I've known for like almost 20 years now. Uh, and she secured the drugs for all of us. And that's the other thing, is like, I'm usually very like, where did you get this? Like, I do my research ahead of time. I just kind of was like, MDMA had been so easy for me in the past. You get a little pill and you swallow it and you feel awesome. It's nothing too heavy. It's beautiful. And she's like, I got moon rocks. We should snort it. And I was like, okay. Went into the bathroom, snorted it, immediately burning like crazy. And I turned to the girl I was dating and my friend at the time, and they were just by my face alone. They're like, okay, we're not going to snort it. So not only was I now like signed up, but everybody else bailed. They're just like, actually, that looks really bad. Like, we'll just swallow it. And so I don't even remember the show, man. I was booing one of the acts. Like, this is like a Calm Trues chill wave, like super awesome venue. I don't remember the name of the venue, but it had like Mongolian statues on the wall, and I was just floating in a cloud this whole time and waiting for Calm Trues to play. And I guess we showed up after his set, and the headliner was somebody else, and I was just like, "Boo!" Like, I want my Com Trues guy, boo! And I'm just so fucked up. But thank God I was in Vancouver, where I'm not the only person that is fucked up on MDMA. Like, the security staff was like, "Here you go, man. Like, here's the way to the bus." Like, not only are they Canadian, but they're also chill with psychedelics. So it was like, I couldn't have been in like a safer spot to be recklessly intoxicated. But like, I again just was not ready for that, and had a full like peak psychedelic experience from like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Like, just like, that was truly, I didn't know MDMA could get you there. I don't think I would have done it if that was going to happen. And it was just like, oh, I'm back at the door again. Like, oh, whoops. Like, I kind of might have got a little sloppy on this one.
Wonderful. That's a good story. Now that it really sounds like you're living the dream. You're a musician in Los Angeles. You're working with cannabis. What curious. My question is, what do you feel when you get to perform live versus being in the studio and working with your producer and making the music, and what has changed for you, or what excites you when you're getting up in front of a crowd versus producing on the back end?
Yeah, that's a great question. I I think, right now, I can speak for right now. I am not. I love performing. I love doing it, but I just feel like, um, I'm obviously inspired by the Beatles, and the
Mhm.
fact that I have access to the records that they did 60 years ago, I can still listen to them as it is. And like, you know, there's not much live Beatles footage. There's not much, and so I see performing live as similar, where it's like the recording is timeless and is
Mhm.
kind of like a legacy that any human can access for hundreds of years in its original state, which is beautiful. And that's what I'm focusing on more now, is like getting as much material out as possible. Because yeah, playing it live is fun. Playing it live is, it's not like, it's not easy. It's a lot of work and rehearsal, but like, when you've been playing your instrument, singing for 20 years, it becomes easier, and it's still just as rewarding. Nothing is as fun as like playing we played a weed festival last year that was probably one of our favorite gigs, because usually we're playing to people drinking or maybe smoking some weed on the side, but this was just like a cloud, a cloud of weed smoke above the crowd the whole time, which, you know, like it or not, that is, those people are going to be more receptive to your music. And so, yeah, like, I'm just so over performing. I've played a bunch of gigs the last couple years, and I'm just like, you know, I could never play the same song for the rest of my life. There's a handful of songs that I might, but it's for me, it's more about just what's the next thing. What's the next idea is always better. So like, why just stick with this old song I wrote when the next song should be better, at least for the next 10, 15 years, hopefully.
Music plays a really important role, especially in real shamanic ayahuasca experiences. There's always live music going on. Have you ever curated or participated in providing music for psychedelic experience? Then when.
I wish. I've made music with the intention, of like a peak experience, or like, just kind of using the framework of a trip to kind of inspire the dynamics of a song or something like that. Um, but I haven't had the privilege to like do a proper, and maybe I just need to do it instead of waiting for someone to ask me. I am doing an ambient set on Sunday for it's a cannabis event that my friend's hosting. We're making jam, but there's going to be musicians playing, and I'll be just creating the vibe for a cannabis event, which is similar. It's not as intentionally inward, obviously, but um, it's funny you asked that too, because I was just turned on to John Hopkins' music for psychedelic therapy like last night. My guitarist showed it to me, and it's just crazy that a successful like artist can release an album that is literally just music for psychedelic therapy. Like, here you go. And so maybe that's just what I need to do. I just need to make some.
Beautiful. Very, this just inspired this question right now. What is, if you had to assign a musical genre, or even when you're producing, what kind of, what is the music for mushrooms versus LSD versus MDMA? What is that sound in your mind, in your ear?
I like that. I mean, I'll start with MDMA because I literally have a playlist I share with my friend, uh, that is called XTC, and it's just pretty much all the fuzziest, warmest electronic music you can think of, where it's just like pulsing. It's almost like electronic music made out of like felt, like that type of music is the MDMA music. I forget. My girlfriend calls this a genre like up and down music or something, that where it's just like, it just goes like do 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 do, and it's just kind of this up and down the whole time. I feel like that's really good for MDMA too. Um, LSD, I've had some awesome experiences listening to like Jimi Hendrix and like, really beautiful, like ornamental, like decorated, like really subtle, like electronic stuff. I feel like electronic too, like Radiohead and uh, like stuff like that is really good for LSD. A lot of like digital and produced stuff. And then mushrooms, like I gotta go with the I gotta go with the tribal stuff. I gotta go with, from Stanislav Grof, his holotropic breathwork music sessions are usually like evocative, loud, percussive, and very little speaking, like the language that I speak. It could be a different language, but like very little words that you actually can understand and like take meaning from or assign labels to. Uh, I think that is probably the purest form of like psychedelic therapy, but I can't take credit for that. That's a Stanislav, that's a Groff discovery that I'm like, I don't see anything wrong with that. I would absolutely transcend to get some tribal drums increasing in intensity for over 20 minutes. Like, of course, I'm going to pick that over Billy Joel. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Something I've noticed, and this I don't know if you've ever been to this festival, Gem and Jam in Tucson, Arizona, that just got postponed. There have been a lot of recent music festivals and live music I feel that's been either postponed or they've had to cancel things. What is, as somebody in the music industry, what is your opinion on the changing economy behind these giant music festivals? Are we moving towards more curated experiences? What is your finger on the pulse of where the industry is heading for live music events and big festivals?
Hmm. I mean, I think as a musician, like we're always looking for that type of festival. Like those are always the best paying gigs. You meet the most people, and it's just a matter of time before like Lockheed Martin wants to be a sponsor, and it just seems to be like this inevitable trend of like really beautiful community oriented art festival that just inevitably becomes commercialized. And I think it's just, I think they'll just keep popping up. I think the psych fests and the levitation fests and whatnot, like I think all of those are like Coachella and all those are dead as is, but like there's always going to be the 80 people that performed Coachella 3 years ago that are like, dude, why don't we just set up our own thing? And there's always somebody that has the land that's willing to do it. You know, it's like Woodstock. It's exactly like Woodstock. There will always be, at least I have faith, as long as land is cheap and
Phoenix rebirth of a new community.
exactly.
Beautiful. Where can people find your music? What you mentioned you're going to be curating an event Sunday. What's exciting and upcoming for you?
I mean, we are just diving into the recording process as a band too, which I'm really excited about. Back into the self-producing thing. It's the exact same place I was 14 years ago, where it's like I could spend this much money on this, engineer and master and all that, or we could just try it again. Because worst case, we have a pile of songs that we've got near completion, and then we just decide let's send it off. But that's I'm really excited about. Um, the pipeline of demo to proper release all under our own roof. That's a goal. I'm not saying it's going to be, that this album is going to be the one, but like we are working towards that goal. And a lot of my favorite musicians have that too, where they're just kind of their own little in-house studio. They tend to have a record label and that pays for like a mix, down the road. But like that's definitely a goal of mine. It's just that bringing it all in-house, in case case funding gets cut and we don't have access to the guy that makes our songs sound good, and it's like we're just powerless without $40,000 budget or something. Just empowering ourselves. It's scary, but we're all just so excited to try it out.
One final question: how did you come up with your musician persona name, and where did that originate?
That was a earnest mishearing of an NPR. I listen to NPR when I'm driving, and somebody was just talking about the concept of cocooning, and I thought I was ready to hear like there's this. Hold on, I'm looking this up. This Japanese concept of forest bathing, Shinrin Yoku. I just learned about that, like how if you're stressed out in the city life, take a bath by walking in the forest, and the terpenes in the air, more plant medicine, like the actual when you smell a pine forest, you are ingesting pine terpenes that are going through your lungs into your bloodstream, into your brain, affecting your mood and clarity. And so I just learned this like awesome Japanese concept. And I was like, what is this concept of kokuni? Google it, nothing. And I literally pulled up the NPR transcript. I'm like, what did he say? Turns out it was cocooning. But when I did Google the word that I thought it was, Kukuni, nothing showed up. So my, 2020 Google brain was just like, this is a band name too. Like, it's the first thing that shows up when you type it, and it sounds cool, and it's not even a real word. Like, I couldn't have come up with this on purpose, so I'll take it on accident.
Beautiful. Well put. Where can people find your music? What are your social handles, and how can they continue to be inspired by you and your sound?
We are on pretty much every major platform: Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. We are most active on Instagram, probably, at Kakuni Music, and my personal too, at Willy Christie, Willy with a Y, Christie with an IE. And like, we have a TikTok too. That's kind of the unhinged, slightly more unhinged version, but we rarely post to that. We're all in our mid to late 30s. We try though. But yeah, Instagram is probably the best place. Like, you can follow us, reach out to us, book us, whatever you need. That's probably the fastest way to get a hold of us.
Beautiful. Please listen to Willy's music and Kakuni. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been really insightful.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.